Hi, guys, it's Carlo here. Thank you for listening to our latest episode. It's the support of our community like you that allows us to continue to grow and make this into something truly extraordinary. If you enjoyed today's episode and you would like to listen to it without the interruption of ads and maybe even experience some bonus content, I'd invite you to join us on our newly launched Patreon. And if maybe that's not something you can do right now, please consider liking, subscribing, sharing, and commenting on places like YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn, Facebook, all that good stuff. You'll find us under @millennials and community for pretty much all of those. Thank you again for listening, and we'll see you again soon.
One, two, three, four.
Welcome to another episode of InfoM.A.C, brought to you by the Millennials and Community Podcast. On this week's episode, Matt and Carlo discuss the TikTok ban that recently passed a vote in Congress down in America, why this can be a sign of greater things to come, whether the TikTok ban will actually happen, and how if it does, the world will probably keep on spinning. Thank you for being part of our community. Hey there, guys. Welcome to another InfoM.A.C. If this is your first time joining us, InfoM.A.C are small, bite-sized episodes designed to bring you some of the world's current events, things that we should be exploring, understanding, and questioning as millennials. So we're going to bring you some fun topics really quickly, hoping it elevates your understanding and makes you wonder a little bit more about what's going on in the world around us. As always, I'm Carlo. And this is Matt. And Matt, we're going to be talking about a really interesting topic. You might even be watching a clip of this show on our topic today. Matt, what are we talking about?
Well, today we're going to talk about something going on that's pretty big in the US news right now, but something that has the potential to have more worldwide implications, particularly here in Canada, and that is the impending ban on TikTok by the US Congress. So for those of you that don't have access to one of these wonderful devices at the palm of our hand that has social media applications, TikTok is, of course, a very, very popular, very well-known, well-used social media app. And it is an app that has jumped in popularity significantly over the last 4 or 5 years especially, and it seems to be at the leading edge right now of popularity of social media apps, particularly around the younger generations of people. Now, the controversy around TikTok stems from the fact that the parent company of TikTok, a company called ByteDance, is a Chinese-based company. And of course, for those of you that aren't familiar with some of the business laws in China, there are provisions in the government's policies in China that basically state that at the drop of a hat, any company based in China is forced to or obligated to turn over any sort of operation about any aspect of their business on the spot to the government. Now, this is particularly concerning when it comes to a social media site that collects, records, and hosts data and personal information of all different types from all of the users that come into the account. So just as like a couple of little things like your IP address, geolocation, device identifiers, search histories, not to mention the actual photo and video content that we actually go and put onto the platform that effectively then becomes the property of ByteDance. And at a moment's notice, the Chinese government could say, oh, yep, we're here to collect all of this information. And that's being optimistic, right? Like that's what the laws that are published say. There's nothing that we know to suggest that the Chinese government isn't actively embedded in these companies at any time. And certainly this was a big controversy back in 2019, 2020 when it came to Huawei and the extent to which Huawei was going to be granted permissions to build cellular networks in North America. This was the same argument going on then. So this certainly isn't the first time that there's been controversy around a Chinese-owned company and the amount of influence that they have here in North America. Well, the nature of the ban or the legislation that's being talked about in the US government right now is that the US Congress has passed now a bill to say that ByteDance has 6 months to divest any sort of interest in TikTok in order for them to continue allowing TikTok to be downloaded in the United States. So basically what they're saying is that if ByteDance doesn't sell TikTok within 6 months, that they will completely prevent Apple, like Apple Store or Google Play Store, any of these stores that allow you to download applications to your devices, they would prevent you from being able to download any updates or connect to any of the servers for this app. Now, this motion passed overwhelmingly in Congress, bipartisan support. The number was 352 votes for, 65 votes against. So very, very significant favor from both sides of the political aisle. And the biggest thing that they're concerned about is two fronts. One, I've already spoken about, it's the potential for the Chinese government to have access to all of this unfettered amounts of information. But the second one is the ability that the Chinese government would then have through ByteDance to use TikTok to spread political propaganda. And this, of course, is particularly noteworthy given that the United States is going to go into an election this fall. And so there is significant reason to believe that China would be very, very highly invested in spreading propaganda that would influence the election results in one way or another. And here in Canada, we've actually know for a fact that China also tried to interfere in the election here in Canada. So this is not tinfoil hat conspiracy stuff. This is stuff that we know that the Chinese government is really trying to influence the way that Western democracies elect their governments. So I guess certainly lots of places to go here, but I guess anything that I missed or any details that you want to add that you find particularly compelling about this?
No, I think you covered all the details that should be immediately apparent. I think as we kind of explore a little bit about what this means, not only here in Canada, but in general terms as well, I can definitely see why there's people that are upset about it, right? At the last I heard 170 million American users for TikTok. That is a very large amount of people. Many businesses that run on TikTok, many content creators that are paid quite well on TikTok. And, when you've made something like that a big part of your life, to be told that it could potentially be taken away for a reason that you don't really empathize with. Because, of course, the argument that a lot of content creators on TikTok are making is that my data is being sold anyways. Companies like Meta, so Facebook and Instagram, they're selling my data. Google is selling my data. Apple is selling my data. So none of this is inherently new. And it's okay for these companies to spread propaganda and the United States to spread propaganda to, the consumers of this content. But it's not okay for China to do so. Now, arguably, that kind of makes sense if you're an American citizen. You don't want them influencing your political theater. And I think it became very, very apparent how actually capable TikTok could be of doing this, because as soon as this potential bill came into light, there was a notification that popped up on a lot of American users' TikToks saying, reach out to your Congress member and let them know what this app means to you. And from what I understand, there was, by the end of days, there was a lot of these Congress members disconnecting their phones because it would not stop ringing. Now, on one hand, that's an exciting thing to hear about all of these younger generations perk up and make their voice heard. But on the other side, it made it very clear this was not your own idea. This was fed to you. And what's going to stop that from happening again when you go to the polls, right?
What you're saying to me is so deeply ironic because So this isn't the first time that the U.S. government has tried to ban TikTok, and in fact, in 2020, then President Trump, tried to ban TikTok by the use of an executive order, and the executive order was written in such a way that it was going to immediately within 45 days, I think, which is kind of a relatively standard term for an executive order to take effect, I think, but within 45 days was going to ban the download or use of TikTok in the United States. This went to courts, and the courts contested that this was actually not constitutional, that this basically amounted to censorship and was a prevention of people's First Amendment rights to free speech, to remove access to a platform like this. And so it's really funny to hear what you're saying about the ability that a platform like this has to share information or misinformation, which, by the way, is not unique to Chinese owned platforms. This is certainly the case of any platform, certainly just because they're based in Western countries or in North America certainly does not make them benevolent, right? Like we know that Meta certainly is not their hands are not clean in terms of the ability or the capacity to spread propaganda. However, the idea that the whole premise by which the first attempt at banning TikTok was shot down was because of an issue with censorship and prevention of the First Amendment. It's funny to think that now that instead, we have incited people's free speech by having TikTok as a platform, asking its users to advocate for its survival.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that one of the big reasons that people are viewing this and really like tackling down this idea of censorship is because when you look at the stuff that has preceded this, and what I'm referring to in specific is there are a clip on social media of various Congress members questioning the CEO of TikTok. And the questions are stupid, right? It makes it very apparent that these people don't really understand even just the basic of how your phone might work or the permissions of apps might work. So questions like, does TikTok access the home Wi-Fi network? Well, I understand that what that person was trying to ask is, does this app try to access other devices on my network? Is it querying any other stuff going on? Well, the answer to that is no. That is something that your Apple phone and your Google phone explicitly prevent. Okay? But the way it was asked made it very apparent that this person doesn't understand the question he's asking. So the answer made him look poorly educated. So as you have these people now looking at what is going on, they're going, well, look at all these stupid questions they've asked. They've just been attacking TikTok from the get-go. This can't be a legitimate concern. There's something else going on. And of course, what has come to light now is that right before the vote, Homeland Security briefed all of these Congress members on the actual security threat. They had a closed doors meeting. We have no idea what happened in it, to say this is what is actually going on so that you can be educated to make your vote. Well, again, we don't know what happened in there. So everybody's going, the people that are upset about this are going, well, you're not telling us this actual concern, you're lying. So again, it becomes, are you lying to us to spread misinformation to us in this way so that you can get rid of it for another reason, to shut down our free speech, to take away our organization, to whatever it may be? So it's very difficult when you're working in this world of kind of espionage in a smaller way of kind of putting it, because the government's not going to tell us the security threat that makes it aware that there's an actual security threat, and ByteDance isn't going to tell us what they're actually doing. So as a whole, the users of this platform are in the dark, and there's no way out of that dark. They kind of just have to go off of what they feel and what, they're gathering from the information being passed around.
And I want to be really, really clear too. I mean, social media has created this world, this environment where, like never before, we think that we're entitled to just ungodly amounts of
Uh,
information. And it's this wild, wild entitlement um, that really is unfounded. But we think because there's access to so much information about so many things, that therefore we are entitled to know everything or know what we desire. And look, the fact is that governments exist in no small part to protect the well-being of our citizens, and that means that there's going to be certain things that the government cannot divulge, because if they were to divulge it more broadly, then it would create significant security
yeah,
issues
yeah.
that are just really not tenable if this was to be published to the general public, and so I think that it's incredibly short-sighted when people feel the need to say, well, we know that Homeland Security or the CIA or the Department of Defense conducted these briefings with Congress, and that's what led to this significant majority vote. Therefore, we need to know what happened. Well, the fact of the matter is that they're going to always act in the interests of their country first, and
Mm-hmm.
so long as they're included in that country, there has to be some level of appreciation that they're going to be acting in the interest. Now, they might not be doing that in a way in which you agree with, but it's one of these things where I think everyone should be on some level critical and questioning of the governments that they have, and yet still have to recognize that there is a significant difference between countries that work in democratic fashion, like Canada, like the United States, and these autocratic nations that are conducting themselves with no sorts of democratic accountability, right? And so you see there being significant differences between these two things. So before we get too excited and questioning the government's choices and the government's work, not to say they shouldn't be questioned,
Mm-hmm.
but just remembering that there are mechanisms in place by which we can actually have an impact. And when it's us against, or positioning ourselves against, these autocratic nations that do not have those democratic accountability mechanisms, like that's something that we need to keep in mind as well.
Yeah, and I think you're right. It's such an important thing, and I think that the greater concern that I have is this idea that, without social media, I think social media is very empowering for a lot of people. I look at us right now; you wouldn't be hearing our voice probably if it wasn't for social media. It is a very empowering thing. The problem is it is not without its flaws, right? And one of those being security, your information, what is done with your content. Because once we put this up on TikTok, it no longer belongs to us. It belongs to TikTok. It belongs to Meta. And I think that one of the interesting things that is coming out of this is almost kind of a more generalized call for a platform that could be of the people, which of course is something that is even more difficult to do, because how do you keep it for the people from the people? There's always going to be somebody put in charge to manage it. Then that brings the lobbyists in, the governments in. That's a whole nother difficult thing. And on a worldwide base, how do we maintain our free speech in a way that is accessible and bipartisan for everybody, right? So one of the things that I really want to talk about is this potential sale of TikTok. And because that's what the bill is. It's not that you can't operate in the United States, it's that you have to sell TikTok. ByteDance can no longer operate or own it. It has to be sold to a company, ideally that is American, but it has to be sold to a company that is not run by China or any other, communist society. So TikTok has over 3 billion accounts, 3 billion users. As I mentioned before, the United States accounts for 170 million of those. So that is not as large an amount of accounts as I think a lot of people tend to realize. And arguably so, and I say this not out of malice, but arguably so, the United States, especially when it comes to this and a lot of other things, has a sense of we're king of the hill, right? They have this idea that we say this can't be owned by a Chinese company, take it or leave it, right? And then also giving them 6 months to make a multi-billion-dollar sale. That's not enough time to do the due diligence required on a sale of that magnitude. That takes years. So they're being set up to fail. And then the question also has to come, why would ByteDance do it? Why would they get rid of that? So it is my anticipation that if this does happen to go through, that TikTok will be rebranded in America as something else, maybe sold to another company that is maybe American operated. Again, there's no way to guarantee there isn't going to be some sort of Chinese allegiance there. But then the rest of the world, maybe even Canada, will continue to have TikTok, while the United States will have some sort of smaller version of that. Because there's just no way that I think ByteDance would sell off that in entirety.
Yeah, I agree. And it's again important to remember that this happened before. So it's not like this is the first time that TikTok has faced a potential ban, and that was found to be unconstitutional. And so anyway, I there are definitely a lot of steps to go. The House has passed it. Now it has to pass the Senate. And so there's certainly other mechanisms in place that may or may not make this an actual thing that we're even talking about, right? Like we
Yeah.
could get 12 months from now and TikToks could very much still be a thing. What I want to maybe turn our attention to before we
Wrap
close
up.
out. I mean, I think I could get into the weeds very much for a long time on the political side of it. And already it's a little bit questionable, by the way, whether our videos on this episode will actually be shadow banned from TikTok or not. So I
We'll
guess we'll
find
find out
out.
together.
Yeah.
But nevertheless, I think what's more important here is you look at the degree of backlash this is getting from the users and the content creators. And we've been hearing stories repeatedly over the last few weeks about how many musicians, comedians, artists have gotten their big break thanks to this as a platform. And I think what the emergence of TikTok has really taught me, and it was really articulated really well by a content creator and entrepreneur that I really admire, Gary Vaynerchuk. And he said that, look, TikTok was not the first platform to garner people's attention and the attention of mass amounts of people, right? It was radio, and then it was TV, and then this thing called the internet came along. And when he started advocating for business to be done on the internet, everybody told him he was out of his mind. And when he started investing in then Twitter and some of these other social platforms, people told me he was out of his mind. And so he put it in context really nicely to say that if TikTok does end up being banned in the United States, and by the way, I would suggest, we haven't touched on this, but I would suggest that if it does get banned in the United States, that Canada would be soon to follow,
Very quickly. Yeah.
given that federal employees are already not allowed to have TikTok on their phones, right? So it would be very quick for this to happen in Canada, for those of you wondering. But what Gary Vaynerchuk says is that, look, people's attention will go somewhere. And so it just creates a really exciting opportunity for content creators to be at the new place where people's attention is going to go quicker than the audience. Because every time one of these new platforms has started, the people who've been the most successful largely are the ones that are there first, because they have the opportunity to become embedded into the algorithms, or they're there before the algorithms really take hold. And so there's more opportunity opportunity for organic growth, organic viewership, and organic ways to gather attention. So it's really important to remember that this will not be the only way for you content creators out there to share your messages, share your gifts, share your art with the world. There will continue to be ways and mechanisms and platforms. You just have to be open and adaptable and willing to do the work to share the message in the way that's best for your audience and for you.
Yeah, and I think one thing that I'd like to point out, and this is going to sound very self-serving because we are content creators, but I think we've relied on these platforms to appropriately compensate our content creators. The idea of that I can receive all of this content for free and never have to pay a dime because I know that TikTok or Instagram are paying from their ad revenue, has created the environment I think we're in right now, where without the platform, we're effectively sentencing that content creator to start from square zero again. So if your favorite content creator has Ko-fi, Patreon, or some other way of supporting them, where if you were going to do it through TikTok, maybe do it outside of TikTok, outside of the social media platform. Not only does that more than likely guarantee a majority more of that money that you're willing to give goes to the actual content creator, but I think it would lessen the content creator's dependency on that actual platform. And I think that's where a lot of this uproar is coming from. A lot of people that are scared, especially if their sole income is from something like TikTok. And I think it brings up this even greater idea of like, well, if they're going to take away this one, they're going to take away the next one and the next one and the next one, right? So like Matt said, it doesn't matter where we congregate. It doesn't matter where we spread our voices. The important thing is that we do, and that we support the people that are willing to put themselves out there and are doing things that are of benefit to other people. So if you have a content creator you like, please support them. Make them know that through all of this, you're going to continue to support them no matter where they are. I think that's probably one of the big things I would take away from all of this.
Yeah, totally agree. And just like anything else, when you see these headlines of TikTok ban, go and do the work, do the research. And by the way, maybe if the headline of TikTok ban is the headline that's shocking you, maybe the best place to get your information is not on TikTok, right? Because you got to remember too that everything is interested in its own survival. And so the information that you're seeing on TikTok probably isn't the least biased information that you're going to access. So
Yeah.
Once again, just like we'll preach time and time again, do the work, read past the headline, understand the reasons and multiple angles, and come to a conclusion when and only when you've done the due diligence to understand your way around certain issues.
Yeah, agreed. All right, guys, this is going to be another episode of InfoM.A.C. Thank you for joining us for this bite-sized bit of news and current events. We hope you learned something today. We hope we've given you something to think about. If you have any questions, concerns, or comments, contact us on social media. We'd invite you to join our Discord. Links are in the episode description. Let us know your thoughts, your stories, and if you have an idea for a topic you want us to cover in the next InfoM.A.C., please let us know. We're always open to suggestions. Thank you guys so much, and have a great evening.
Take care, everyone.